She leaned in so close she could feel the heat coming off his skin. Her hand was flat on the table, her voice was barely above a breath. And what she said next, 6 words, barely a whisper, would change everything about the next 24 hours of her life. Don't look back, just pay and go. The man she was whispering to did not move, did not flinch, did not do what any normal person would do when a waitress suddenly appears at their ear with urgency in her voice. He went completely, unnervingly still, the way a storm goes quiet right before it decides what it wants to destroy. Then slowly, without turning his head, he said, "Say that again." Mallory straightened up. Her heart was slamming. Her face was neutral. 8 months of learning how to be invisible in a foreign country had taught her one thing above everything else: never let them see that your hands are shaking. "There is a man at the bar," she said quietly, like she was reciting the evening specials. "He has been watching this table for 40 minutes, and he has not touched his drink once. The man near the entrance came in 20 minutes ago and has not looked at the menu. And the man walking toward you right now from the front door," she paused, set an empty glass down on the table, "is not here for dinner." This time the man turned, not to look at the door, not to look at the bar. He turned to look at her. And Mallory Collins, 28 years old, Atlanta-born, 4 months into a waitressing job she took to cover her heating bill, felt the full weight of Kang Ji-won's attention land on her like a physical thing. He had been in the restaurant for 90 minutes, and in that time she had clocked him the way she clocked every table. Systematically, professionally, efficiently. The tattoos on his hands, the way his 2 companions had positioned themselves facing every exit without being asked. The way Manager O had personally rearranged the furniture for this reservation with trembling hands. She had clocked all of it and filed it and kept moving because that was her job, and the first rule of this job was eyes open, mouth shut. Until 60 seconds ago when she had stopped obeying that rule entirely. Ji-won looked at her for a long moment. His expression gave away absolutely nothing. Then, without looking away from her, he reached across the table, picked up his glass, and took one unhurried sip of water. "Sit down," he said. "I'm working." "Sit down." "Sir." What happened next made the breath leave her body. He reached out, not grabbing, nothing violent, just the lightest press of 2 fingers against her wrist. And he pulled her close. Close enough that she could see the ink crawling up the side of his neck. Close enough that his voice, when it came, was meant only for her. "You just stepped into something," he said quietly. "So until I say otherwise, you are with me. Do you understand?" She understood nothing. She understood everything. And then the man from the front door reached the table and smiled. "If you are watching this for the first time, welcome. Drop a comment right now and tell me, would you have said something? Or would you have kept walking? Because I need to know what kind of person you are before we go any further. Subscribe if you haven't. Like the video. Because this story is just getting started, and you are going to want to be here for every single second of it. Now, let's go back to the beginning. 2 hours earlier, Mallory Collins was arguing with a table about banchan. Specifically, the gentleman at table 3 felt that the kimchi was too fermented, which, in Mallory's private opinion, was like complaining that water was too wet. But she smiled, she nodded, she said, "Of course, sir, let me see what the kitchen can do," because that was the job, and she was good at the job. She was good at a lot of things nobody noticed. That had been true her whole life. She was the kind of person who walked into a room and read it completely. Every exit, every tension, every unspoken thing moving underneath the surface of ordinary conversation. And then went unnoticed doing it. Back in Atlanta, her uncle, a 20-year police veteran, used to say she had the best situational awareness he had ever seen in a civilian. "You see everything, Mal," he used to tell her. "The trick is knowing when to act on it." She was still working out that part. Seoul had been her fresh start. 8 months ago, she had packed 2 suitcases, said goodbye to a version of herself she was done being, and landed at Incheon Airport with a 1-year English teaching contract and absolutely no idea what she was doing. Her mother had cried. Her friends had called it brave. Mallory had called it necessary. The city had swallowed her whole in the best possible way. She loved the noise of it, the way it never really went dark, never really went quiet, just shifted registers from day loud to night loud, delivery bikes and street food vendors, and the particular specific smell of Seoul in October, which was cold air and sesame oil and something electric underneath that she had never managed to name. She was learning Korean slowly and badly and with great enthusiasm, mostly under the patient guidance of Park Nara, her fellow waitress at Aria, who had taken to recording Mallory's pronunciation for what she claimed was purely educational purposes, and definitely was not. She had built a life here, small, manageable, hers. And then, at 7 p.m. on a Thursday, Manager O had taken a phone call, turned the colour of old newspaper, and started personally rearranging the VIP corner booth, table 7, best sightline to every door in the building, with hands that could not quite stay steady. Mallory had watched him from across the floor. Something is wrong, she thought. She had no idea how right she was. Nara appeared at Mallory's elbow like she had been summoned. She was small and quick and had the kind of face that smiled easily. But she was not smiling now. She grabbed Mallory's arm just above the wrist and pulled her 2 steps toward the service station, away from the floor, away from the other staff moving around them. "That table tonight," Nara said. Her voice was low. Careful. The voice she used when she was being serious and needed Mallory to understand that she was being serious. "Just take the order. Don't ask questions. Don't make conversation. Don't linger." Mallory looked at her. "Nara, who is coming?" "It doesn't matter who is coming." "It clearly matters. Look at Manager O." They both looked. Manager O was currently repositioning a flower arrangement that did not need repositioning, moving it 2 inches to the left, then 2 inches back, his forehead carrying the particular shine of a man whose body had decided to sweat on his behalf. "Mallory," Nara squeezed her arm, "I am your friend. As your friend, I am telling you, take the order, refill the water, smile, and walk away. That is all." "You're scaring me." "Good," Nara said, and went back to work. Mallory stood at the service station for 3 seconds, filed it, kept moving. At 7:45, the door opened. She was not watching the door. She was delivering a seafood pancake to table 11 and explaining in her best Korean how, which her students generously described as improving, that yes, it was freshly made when she felt the room change. Not a sound, not a visible shift, just pressure. The way a room feels when something walks in that the room was not quite prepared for. She finished at table 11, turned around. 3 men had taken their seats at table 7. The 2 on the outside were built like decisions, broad, quiet, the kind of still that wasn't relaxed but contained. Their eyes moved across the restaurant in slow, methodical sweeps. Not aggressive, just aware, cataloguing. The kind of men who memorized rooms the way other people memorized grocery lists. The man in the middle was different. He was lean where they were broad, composed where they were watchful. He wore a dark suit with the jacket open at the collar, and where the collar fell away there was ink, a tattoo climbing the side of his neck in dark, deliberate lines that disappeared beneath the fabric. His hair was black and fell to his shoulders, and he had the kind of face that belonged in a different century. All strong jaw and sharp angles and a mouth set in a line that gave nothing away. He did not look around the restaurant the way powerful men usually looked around rooms, performing awareness, wanting to be seen seeing. He simply settled into his chair like a man who had already memorized the layout before he arrived and picked up the menu. And that was that. Mallory picked up her notepad. She walked to table 7. "Good evening," she said in Korean, her best pronunciation the one Nara had drilled into her. "Welcome to Aria. Can I start you with something to drink?" One of the flanking men answered. Water still, for the table. Professional. Clipped. He didn't look at her when he said it. She wrote it down. She was about to turn away when the man in the middle looked up. 2 seconds. That was all. A brief assessing look, the kind that measured and categorized and filed in one smooth motion. Not rude, not warm. She was in that look simply part of the inventory of the room. Staff, present, accounted for, irrelevant. Then he looked back at the menu. "I'll give you a few minutes," Mallory said pleasantly, and walked away. Nara intercepted her at the pass. "How did it go?" "Fine. They want still water." "Did they?" "Nara?" Mallory looked at her. "I took a drinks order. I did not accidentally join the mob. Everything is fine." Nara's expression did the specific thing it did when she wanted to say something and had decided against it. She handed Mallory a tray and went back to her section. The first 40 minutes were quiet. Mallory ran her floor. Table 3 got their less fermented kimchi. Table 9 celebrated a birthday and she sang along with the staff in Korean badly enough that the birthday girl laughed. Table 12 needed the bill. Ordinary Thursday. She checked on table 7 twice. Both times smooth. The food arrived, the water was refilled, the conversation at the table was low and in Korean, and conducted with the specific economy of men who had worked together long enough to communicate in half sentences. The second time she approached, the man in the middle, she still did not know his name, would not know it for another hour, said something in Korean. Low, almost to himself. She caught none of it. Not a syllable. She tilted her head, said with the particular ease of someone who had made peace with not knowing everything yet. "I'm sorry. My Korean is still pretty terrible. I got the days of the week down last week and I thought I was making real progress, but apparently..." Something moved in his face. Not irritation, not amusement exactly. Something between the two. A small recalibration, like a compass needle that had been pointed one direction and had just been introduced to north. He looked up at her fully, and then, without pause, without making her feel the gap, without any of the performative patience that people sometimes used when switching languages for someone else's benefit, he said in flawless, unaccented English, "I said the food is good." "Oh," she smiled, genuine, not performed. "I'll tell the kitchen. They'll be pleased." She walked away. She did not look back, but she thought about it. That switch, that ease, that complete absence of condescension, for the next 15 minutes while she ran her other tables. Filed it away in the same place she filed everything. The place she had been building since she was old enough to understand that the people nobody watches are the ones who can afford to watch everybody else. It was that place, that careful, crowded, quietly attentive place, that saved her life 40 minutes later. Because at 8:31 she noticed the man at the bar. She noticed him the way she noticed everything, sideways, incidentally, while she was doing something else entirely. She was waiting for a drinks order, and she looked up, and he was there. Corner of the bar, dark jacket, a glass in front of him that had not moved in 20 minutes. He was not looking at the bar. He was not looking at his phone. He was not looking at the other patrons or the door or the beautiful interior of one of Gangnam's finest restaurants. He was looking at table 7. Mallory looked away immediately, picked up her tray, walked to table 5. Her brain was already running. She gave it 2 minutes. Then she took the long route back to the service station, past the bar, unhurried, not looking, just a waitress navigating her floor. And she was close enough as she passed to see the glass properly. Whiskey. Untouched. Slowly going warm. A man who ordered a drink he did not want so he would have a reason to sit somewhere specific for a specific amount of time. Her stomach tightened. She kept walking. Reached the entrance side of the restaurant on the next pass. Another long route. Another ordinary-looking journey between tables. And she clocked the second man. Alone. Arrived maybe 25 minutes ago. Jacket on despite the warmth of the restaurant. The jacket fell wrong on the left side. She had known that shape since she was 12 years old. Her uncle had carried his service weapon off duty to every family occasion she could remember: Thanksgiving, graduations, Sunday dinners. And she had grown up watching the way it changed the line of a jacket, the way fabric pulled slightly wrong over something it was not designed to conceal. She knew that shape. Her heart was steady, her face was steady. Inside, she was running every scenario she had, and none of them were good. She pulled Nara into the back hallway. "The man at the bar in the dark jacket," she said quietly. "Don't look now. Has he ordered food?" Nara's smile faded. "No. Manager O seated him. Said he was a regular." "Has he been here before?" "I've never seen him." "And the man near the entrance. Alone, light grey jacket. Mallory." Nara's voice dropped to almost nothing. "What are you seeing?" "I don't know yet," Mallory said. "Stay in the back for a few minutes, okay? Just stay back here." "You're scaring me," Nara whispered. "Good," Mallory said, and walked back out onto the floor. She had been back at the service station for less than 90 seconds when the front door opened. Kim Cheol-soo walked in like he owned the city. He was handsome in the way that expensive things were handsome: polished, deliberate, maintained. Dark suit, easy smile. Two men behind him matching his stride. He paused just inside the entrance, let his eyes travel the room once. And then he started walking. Directly. Purposefully. Toward table 7. Mallory looked at the bar. The man with the untouched whiskey had shifted forward slightly in his seat. She looked at the entrance. The man with the wrong-falling jacket had his hand inside his coat. She looked at table 7. At the man with the shoulder-length black hair and the tattoos and the flawless English who had no idea what was converging on him from 3 directions in the next 30 seconds. She had 3 seconds to decide. She picked up an empty glass from the service station, and she walked. She walked like she belonged there. That was the trick, the thing her uncle had told her once about moving through dangerous spaces. Don't creep. Don't rush. Move like the floor is yours and your business is ordinary. She had been practicing that walk her whole life without knowing it had a name. In Seoul, it had become second nature. A Black American woman navigating a city that sometimes stared and sometimes didn't see her at all, and she had learned to use both. She reached table 7 in 12 steps. She leaned down. The man's cologne hit her first, cedar, clean, and underneath it something colder that she couldn't name, something that belonged to late nights and decisions made in quiet rooms. She was close enough to see the detail of the ink on his neck, the precise lines of it disappearing beneath his collar. She kept her voice below the jazz, below the conversation, below everything. Don't look back, just pay and go. The man at the bar has been watching this table for 40 minutes and hasn't touched his drink. The man near the entrance is carrying on his left side, and the one walking toward you right now. She set the empty glass down with a small, natural click. Did not come here for dinner. She straightened up, and Kang Ji-won turned to look at her. Not at the bar, not at the door, not at Cheol-soo, who was now 15 feet away and closing. He turned, and he looked at Mallory Collins like she was the only thing in the room worth looking at. Like she had just said something in a language he had stopped expecting to hear. 3 things happened simultaneously. Cheol-soo arrived at the table with his smile already in place. Ji-won's right-hand man, the one she would later learn was called Min-jae, shifted his chair in a movement so casual it looked accidental and was absolutely not. And Ji-won reached out and pressed 2 fingers lightly against Mallory's wrist. Not a grab, not a threat, just contact. Deliberate and brief, and somehow more commanding than either of those things would have been. "Sit down," he said quietly. "I'm working." "Sit down. Sir, I really need to—" "You stepped into this," he said. Still quiet, still unhurried. Like Cheol-soo was not standing 3 feet away. like the man at the bar had not just put his hand on the counter. Which means right now you are with me. So you are going to stand exactly where you are, and you are not going to move until I say. Do you understand? Mallory understood that she had made a catastrophic miscalculation. She also understood that walking away was no longer the safe option it had been 60 seconds ago. She stayed. Cheol-soo stopped at the table, looked at Ji-won with the warm, practiced smile of a man who had learned early that smiling while you threatened people made them feel like the problem was theirs. He spoke in Korean, smooth, conversational, the tone of an old acquaintance catching up. Mallory understood maybe one word in 7, but she didn't need the words. She had the faces. She had the body language. She had years of reading rooms that hadn't bothered to translate themselves for her. Ji-won responded, equally smooth, equally calm. If she hadn't known what she knew, she would have thought this was two colleagues running into each other unexpectedly. A mild inconvenience pleasantly managed. But Min-jae had repositioned again, barely, subtly, and the third man at Ji-won's table had his hand below the table surface. And the woman she would later learn was Soo-yeon, had appeared from somewhere near the back wall and was standing at an angle that covered the room in a way that had nothing to do with standing. Then Cheol-soo looked at Mallory. It was a different kind of look than Ji-won's had been. Ji-won had assessed her the way you assessed a room, efficiently, without performance. Cheol-soo assessed her the way someone assessed something they were considering acquiring, slow, deliberate, like she was an item on a list he was making. He said something in Korean, looked back at Ji-won. Ji-won said nothing. Cheol-soo's smile widened slightly. He switched to English, unhurried, deliberate, a performance aimed squarely at her. New asset. The word landed like a stone in still water. Mallory felt her jaw tighten, kept her face completely neutral, kept her eyes on the middle distance the way she had learned, the way you look when you need people to read nothing from your expression and everything from your stillness. Ji-won still hadn't answered. He was looking at Cheol-soo with an expression so controlled it was almost bored, and Mallory had the sudden certain feeling that this was what dangerous actually looked like. Not raised voices, not visible weapons, not drama. This absolute, unhurried, immovable calm. Cheol-soo said something else in Korean. This time his tone shifted, barely briefly, and whatever he said made Soo-yeon's chin lift and Min-jae's shoulders settle in a way that looked like readiness. Then Ji-won spoke. 4 sentences. Low. Measured. The temperature of the table dropped about 10 degrees, and Mallory watched Cheol-soo's smile do something complicated. Stay on his face, but stop reaching his eyes, like a light behind glass, being slowly covered. There was a pause. Then Cheol-soo laughed, short, easy, unbothered. The performance of a man who needed the last moment to belong to him. He looked at Mallory one more time, said in English, softly, like a footnote, "Enjoy your evening." He turned and walked back toward the entrance. His 2 men fell in behind him. The man near the door who had been carrying stepped away from the wall. The man at the bar finally picked up his glass. And the restaurant breathed. It was subtle. Nobody at the other tables had any idea what had just passed through the room. The jazz kept playing. A couple near the window were laughing at something on a phone. An older man was refilling his wife's tea. Arya continued being exactly what it appeared to be on the surface, and absolutely nothing of what it was underneath. Mallory realized her hand was flat on the table and had been for the last 4 minutes. She picked it up, straightened, reached for the empty glass she had set down. Ji-won reached into his jacket, withdrew his wallet, set a folded stack of bills on the table. She couldn't count it, but it was enough for 3 tables, maybe 4. And then he looked up at her. "Come with us," he said. "No." He paused. Like the word was one he encountered rarely enough that he needed a moment to process it. "It isn't a—" "No," she said again, still steady, still neutral. I am at work. Whatever that was, it is not my situation. I would like you all to have a wonderful evening somewhere that is not this restaurant. Something happened in his eyes. It didn't make it to his mouth, not quite, not fully. But it was there. Something that in a different life, on a different man, would have been the beginning of a smile. Reasonable, he said. He stood, buttoned his jacket, said something quietly to Minji, and then he walked out of Aria without looking back, and his people followed, and the door swung shut behind them, and Mallory stood at table 7 with an empty glass in her hand and her pulse doing something it had no business doing. Manager O emerged from his office 7 minutes later, looked at the empty table 7, and made a sound like a man who had just been told his house had not burned down after all. Nara found Mallory at the service station. She didn't say anything. She just stood next to her for a moment and then very quietly refilled Mallory's water glass and set it in front of her. Mallory drank the whole thing. The rest of the shift passed, the way shifts pass after something has happened that you are not yet ready to process. On autopilot, one task at a time, the muscle memory of the job carrying you forward, while your brain sat quietly in the corner doing calculations. Table 9 needed dessert menus. Table 12 wanted separate checks. The kitchen was running behind on one order and ahead on another, and the choreography of managing both required enough focus to keep her hands busy, if not her mind. She counted her tips at the end of the shift, with hands that were finally, blessedly steady. She changed out of her uniform in the small staff room at the back. Nara was waiting by the door in her coat, face carefully arranged into something that was trying very hard not to ask questions and failing completely. "I'm fine," Mallory said before she could speak. "I didn't say anything." "Your face said it." "My face is concerned because my friend just," Nara, "whispered something to a man who I am not going to name in this building." Nara, and then stood at his table while Kim Cheol-soo, she stopped herself, put her hand over her mouth, looked at the ceiling. The name landed in the room like something dropped from a height. Kim Cheol-soo. Mallory filed it, stored it, said nothing. "Go home," she told Nara gently. "Lock your door. Don't call me until morning because I need to think." Nara grabbed her arm. "You need to be careful. Those are not... Mallory, those are not men you get involved with and walk away from unchanged. Do you understand what I'm saying to you?" "I understand," Mallory said. And she walked out into October Seoul. The street outside Aria was quiet in the way Gangnam got quiet after 10. Not empty, never empty, but slower. The restaurants were thinning out. The convenience stores burned their fluorescent light into the pavement. Somewhere, a block away, a delivery bike accelerated through a green light, and the sound of it faded into the general nighttime frequency of the city. Mallory pulled her coat closed and turned towards the subway. She got exactly half a block. The black car she had not heard approach was moving alongside her slowly. Pace matched to hers, unhurried, patient. She kept walking. The window came down. She stopped. Min-jae was driving. The front seat was quiet and careful, and he was looking straight ahead with the deliberate neutrality of a man giving someone else space to make a choice. In the back seat, Kang Ji-won sat with his jacket still perfect, and his expression still unreadable, and his eyes on her face like he had been waiting precisely this long, and not a second more. Before either of them spoke, Min-jae's eyes found hers briefly in the rearview mirror. "He is not a bad man," Min-jae said quietly, carefully. In English, that was deliberate and kind and meant every word. "But he is not a safe one either. You should understand the difference before you decide anything tonight." Mallory held his gaze in the mirror for a moment. Then she looked at Ji-won. "You noticed things tonight that trained men missed," Ji-won said. No preamble, no performance. "I want to know how." "I'm a waitress," she said. She hadn't stopped walking. The car kept pace. "You are more than that. Good night." The city moved around them. A couple arguing softly outside a pojangmatcha, the smell of tteokbokki drifting from a street cart, a group of university students crossing the road ahead. Seoul at its Thursday night frequency, indifferent and alive. Then Jiwon said, "Chilsu's man photographed you before they left. Your name tag was visible, they have already run your name." Mallory kept walking. "They know your address," he continued. "They know you are American. They know you are here alone." She kept walking. "And they know," he said very quietly, "that there is no one in this city who would notice quickly if something happened to you." Mallory stopped walking. The city kept going around her. The street cart, the students, the convenience store light, all of it continuing forward without her, while she stood very still on a Gangnam pavement at 10:15 at night and felt the specific particular weight of being alone in a foreign country settle over her like cold water. She turned and looked at the open car door. She looked at Jiwon. Her mother's voice was in her head. Every lesson, every warning, every Mallory, don't you dare that had ever been said to her across a kitchen table in Atlanta. She heard all of it, loud and clear and absolutely valid. She also heard Min-jae. Not a bad man, not a safe one. Understand the difference. She looked at the door again, at the empty seat, at Jiwon who had not moved, had not pushed, had not said a single word since the last one landed. Just let it sit there and let her breathe and let the choice be entirely hers. A man trying to force her wouldn't give her room to think. She was building a case on small things. She knew it, the English without condescension, the reasonable when she said no, the cash left for tables he didn't own, the way he had said "you are with me," like it was protection and not possession. Small things. She was building a case on small things, and she knew that was exactly what a woman in a bad situation told herself before she made it worse. If this is a mistake, she thought, let it at least be an informed one. She got in the car, but she kept her hand on the door handle the entire ride. And Kang Ji-won, who noticed everything, looked at that hand and said nothing. The penthouse was on the 32nd floor of a building in Hanam-dong that had no signage at the entrance and a lobby that looked like a private members' club. Dark stone, low light, a single security desk staffed by a man who did not look up when they walked in, but whose hand moved beneath the desk in a way that suggested he had catalogued all three of them before the elevator doors opened. Nobody spoke in the elevator. Mallory watched the numbers climb and kept her breathing even and her face neutral and told herself she was fine. She was fine. She had gotten into a car with a stranger in a foreign country at 10:30 at night because he had told her she was in danger and she had believed him, and whether that was good instinct or catastrophic judgment she would find out shortly. The doors opened directly into the apartment. She had expected. She didn't know what she had expected. Something cold. Something that looked like power arranged deliberately to remind you of itself. Dark surfaces and expensive emptiness. The aesthetic of a man who wanted you to feel small the moment you walked in. What she got was books. Everywhere. Stacked on purpose-built shelves that lined an entire wall from floor to ceiling. Stacked on the low table in front of a wide charcoal sofa. Two on the windowsill with their covers face down. A small pile on the floor beside an armchair that had the particular worn quality of something used daily and never replaced because why would you replace something that had become exactly right? The far wall was entirely glass. Seoul spread out below it in every direction. The Han River cutting through the city like a slow, dark ribbon threaded with light. The bridges strung like jewelry across it. The glow of Gangnam on one bank and the quieter shimmer of the north on the other. It was the kind of view that made the city look like it was performing just for you. And on the walls, ink paintings, traditional Korean. 4 of them, different sizes, each one hung with the specific care of someone who had chosen exactly where the light would fall on it. Austere and quiet and old, mountains, water, mist. The kind of art that asked you to slow down, and she almost did immediately before she remembered where she was and why. Someone appeared, one of Ji-won's people, a young woman she hadn't seen at the restaurant, and set a cup of tea on the table in front of the sofa without being asked, and disappeared again. Mallory looked at the tea. She had not asked for tea. She did not ask for tea. She sat down on the edge of the sofa and wrapped both hands around the cup anyway because her hands needed something to do, and it was warm, and October had gotten into her bones somewhere between the restaurant and the car. Ji-won spoke quietly to his people in Korean. Fast, low, efficient. 3 of them moved to a long table against the side wall where screens had already been set up. Laptops open, a quiet hum of hardware, the focused silence of people who knew exactly what they were doing. One of them said something back to Ji-won, and he nodded once, and that was apparently all the briefing that was needed. They were going to scrub her. She understood that without being told. Name, image, wherever Seoul-su's man had uploaded that photograph. They were going to find it and remove it, and she was sitting in a crime lord's penthouse drinking tea she hadn't asked for while it happened, and the surreal quality of this was not lost on her. Her phone buzzed. She looked down. Mom. The contact name sat on her screen with its little phone emoji and its Atlanta 404 area code and its Wednesday evening check-in energy, and Mallory stared at it for a long moment. Watched it ring. Thought about picking up. About what she would say. About the particular voice her mother would use if she heard something wrong underneath the nothing's fine, and how that voice would unravel her completely. She watched it ring out, put the phone face down on her knee, pressed her hands back around the warm cup and looked at the Han River and did not think about Atlanta. One of Ji-won's men passed through the room and said something brief, to no one in particular, to the general space, and kept moving. Mallory caught 2 words she recognized, and about 5 she didn't, but she caught enough. Aria, Anja, Iseo. Safe. Sitting. The restaurant staff. He had sent someone to check on the restaurant staff. All of them. Not because it was strategic. There was nothing strategic about it. Cheol-su's interest was in Ji-won and now in Mallory, not in a Gangnam restaurant's service team. He had done it because they were people who had been in a room where something dangerous passed through, and checking on them was the right thing to do. Mallory filed that, put it somewhere careful and specific, and did not examine it yet. She stood up and walked slowly along the wall of paintings. The first 3 were beautiful in the expected way, accomplished, traditional, the kind of work that belonged in a gallery and knew it. Mountains rendered in careful washes of grey and black. A river bend caught in 3 brushstrokes that somehow contained the whole idea of a river. The 4th one stopped her. It was smaller than the others. Hung slightly lower, at a height that suggested it had been placed where someone could see it from a chair rather than a standing position. A mountain landscape, specific, particular, not a generalized mountain, but a mountain, one specific configuration of peaks and approaching mist that she had seen before, not in person, in a book. A survey of mid-century Korean ink artists she had fallen into one rainy Sunday 3 months ago when she was supposed to be lesson planning and had ended up reading for 4 hours. She leaned closer. The brushwork on the mist was extraordinary, restrained in a way that took enormous confidence, the kind of restraint that comes from knowing exactly what you don't need to say. And the hand, the specific quality of the mark-making, the way the brush had been held and moved and lifted, was different from the other 3 paintings. Distinctly, unmistakably different. This one, she said, without planning to, without turning around. Just said it to the painting because the painting deserved it. The brushwork on the mist. This is a woman's work. The restraint is different. The other 3 are technically perfect, but this one is personal. Whoever painted this loved what they were painting. The room went quiet in a different way. Not the working quiet of before. Something else? She felt it before she turned. Ji-won was standing near the far end of the room. She didn't know when he had moved there. He was looking at her with an expression that she could not read and could not look away from. Not the assessing neutrality of the restaurant, not the controlled calm of the standoff. Something underneath all of that. Something that had been covered a long time and had just, briefly, without his permission, surfaced. She held his gaze. It was painted by someone, he said, very carefully, who loved that mountain, the way he said it, the specific weight of loved. Past tense carried like present. She understood immediately and completely who had painted it. She didn't push. She didn't ask. She just nodded once. The nod of someone who has received something and knows to hold it gently, and turned back to the painting. Behind her, she heard him breathe out slowly, like he had been holding something and had just, carefully, set it down. Soo-yeon found her 10 minutes later. Ji-won had taken a call in the other room. She could hear the low register of his voice through the wall. Not the words, just the cadence of it, controlled and serious. His people were still working at the screens. The tea had gone lukewarm. Soo-yeon appeared at her shoulder like she had been standing there longer than Mallory had noticed. She was a small woman, fine-boned, precisely put together, the kind of still that came from discipline rather than nature. She looked at Mallory the way a mathematician looks at an equation that isn't behaving as expected. "He doesn't bring people here," she said. "Not hostile, just factual. A piece of information being placed on a table." "I gathered," Mallory said. "Women who get close to him," Soo-yeon continued, in careful, precise English, "don't stay close to him. Not because he hurts them, because he removes them before it becomes anything. He decides the risk is too high and he withdraws, and he is very thorough about it." Mallory looked at her. "Is this a warning?" "It's information," Soo-yeon said. "What you do with it is your business." She paused. "Don't mistake being protected for being wanted. They feel similar from the inside, but they are not the same thing." Mallory was quiet for a moment, looked at the painting, looked back at Soo-yeon. "I didn't ask to be protected," she said simply. Soo-yeon studied her, the mathematical look again, running the equation, checking the result, finding it either correct or interesting. She said nothing further, just turned and walked back to the screens. But she didn't look hostile after that. She looked almost thoughtful. When Ji-won came back into the room, his people were finishing up. One of them said something brief, and he nodded, and they began shutting down the screens with the efficiency of people accustomed to leaving no trace. He sat across from her, not behind a desk, not elevated in any way, just across. Two people in a room. The Han River below them doing what it had been doing for centuries, indifferent to everything human beings arranged themselves around it. "It's done," he said. "The photograph is gone. Your name has been removed from what they pulled. It will hold." "Thank you," she said. He looked slightly uncomfortable with that, with gratitude offered directly, like it was a thing he didn't know where to put. He moved past it. "How did you learn to read a room the way you do?" She looked at him for a moment, considered deflecting, decided against it. "My uncle," she said. "He was a cop in Atlanta for 20 years. I grew up around someone who never stopped being aware of his environment, who sat with his back to walls, who counted exits, who noticed things before they became things. It got into me early." "That's training?" Ji-won said. "What you did tonight was more than that." She was quiet for a moment. "When you grow up being the person that rooms don't quite see," she said slowly, "you learn to use it. Invisibility feels like a disadvantage until you realize that the person no one is watching gets to watch everyone. I've been reading rooms since I was old enough to understand that being overlooked wasn't going away, so I might as well make it useful." Something in Ji-won's face shifted. Not softened, that wasn't the word. Opened. Like a window in a room that had been sealed a long time, worked carefully loose by something patient and unhurried. He looked at her like he was recalculating something fundamental. Then the wall came back, subtle, practiced, a thing he had been doing so long it was probably involuntary. And he said, "You should go home." Back to Atlanta. Whatever brought you to Seoul isn't worth this. You don't know what brought me to Seoul. No, he said, steady. I don't. The Han River glittered below them. A silence that was not uncomfortable settled over the room. Then Mallory stood up abruptly. Actually, she picked up her bag. I'm going to go. I'll sort out Cheolsu myself. I'll move apartments. There are things I can do, practical things. I don't need to. She was moving toward the door, talking herself into momentum. I appreciate tonight, I genuinely do, but this is not my world, and I don't. Mallory. Just her name. Nothing else. No command attached to it, no explanation, just her name, in his voice for the first time. The way he said it stopped her completely, like he already knew it, like he had been holding it carefully since Manager O's reservation sheet and had just now, in this moment, decided to use it. She stood at the door with her hand not quite on the handle. 3 seconds. 4. She came back and sat down. Neither of them mentioned it. The question he asked next was not the one she expected. She had been waiting for something strategic. Something about Cheolsu, about what else she had noticed, about whether she had heard anything specific in the restaurant that might be useful to him. The kind of question that would remind her cleanly of what this was and what she was in it. Instead, he said, "Why, Seoul?" She looked at him. "You said I don't know what brought you here," he said. "So tell me." She was quiet for a moment. Outside, the Han River moved through the city the way it always had, patient, unhurried, older than every building on its banks. She had looked at that river from the bridge near her apartment on her 3rd day in Seoul, jet-lagged and overwhelmed, and quietly certain she had made the right decision. And something in the particular quality of its indifference had steadied her. I needed to be somewhere nobody had a version of me already, she said. Back home, everyone had known me long enough to have an idea of who I was, and some of those ideas were kind and some weren't, but all of them were fixed. I couldn't move without running into someone's expectation of me, she paused. My father passed away 2 years ago, and grief does something to you that I don't think you can explain to someone who hasn't felt it. It makes you a stranger to yourself for a while, like you're living inside someone else's outline. And when I came back to myself, I was different. Enough that the life I had built didn't quite fit anymore. She looked at the river. Seoul felt like space, like I could be whoever I was becoming without anyone measuring it against who I used to be. The room was very quiet. Jiwon had not moved. He was watching her with the particular attention of someone who was not just listening to the words, but to the architecture underneath them, the thing the words were built on top of. Your father, he said. Yes. What was he like? Nobody asked that. People said, I'm sorry for your loss, and moved carefully past it, the way you moved past something fragile in a room. And she had learned to let them because it was easier than watching people be uncomfortable with grief. Nobody just asked, like they wanted to know, like the answer mattered. She looked at Jiwon. Stubborn, she said. Funny without trying to be. He had this quality of paying complete attention to whoever was in front of him, like you were the only thing happening. She paused. He would have found tonight very difficult to explain to himself. Something shifted in Jiwon's expression. Not amusement. Something adjacent to it. Warmer. My mother was the same, he said, quiet, like he hadn't planned to say it. She waited. He looked at the painting on the wall, the small one, the 4th one, hung at a sitting height. His jaw was set, but his eyes were something else entirely. She painted every Saturday morning, he said, from before I can remember until... He stopped, adjusted. She said the mountain was patient, that it would always be there to paint again next week. Is it a real mountain? North of Seoul, about 2 hours. Have you been back? Since... No. One word. A door, not slammed but firmly, quietly closed. She heard it and did not push, and he noticed that she didn't push, and something in the set of his shoulders changed. Minutely, barely perceptibly. But she was watching. She always was. "Will Cheol-su come after me?" she asked. They had been sitting in silence for a moment. Not awkward silence, the other kind. The kind that two people fall into when something real has been said, and neither of them wants to be the first to replace it with something smaller. "His interest in you is leverage," Ji-won said, back to measured now, back to the controlled cadence of a man discussing something tactical. "You were present at a table where you shouldn't have been. You warned me. He saw that. He will want to use you to apply pressure. To you. Yes. So I'm a problem because of you. You're a problem," he said carefully, "because you chose to act. That was your decision, and I am not going to diminish it by calling it anything other than what it was. Brave and reckless, and more effective than anything my own people did tonight." She absorbed that. The directness of it. The complete absence of softening. "So what happens now?" "I make it clear to Cheol-su that any move toward you carries consequences he cannot afford. And if he doesn't listen?" "He will listen." The way he said it. Not a threat performed for her benefit. Just a fact. A thing that was going to be true because he was going to make it true, and that was the end of it. "I don't want anyone hurt because of me," she said. "That consideration," he said quietly, "has never been part of this world." "I know. I'm saying it anyway." He looked at her for a moment. "I know you are." And there it was again. That thing that kept happening in the space between his words. That small, precise opening. Like he was not just answering her, but acknowledging her. Like the distinction between "I hear you" and "you are heard" was something he understood completely and was choosing, carefully, the second one. She stood to leave. He stood at the same moment, not mirroring her, just the natural movement of someone whose habits included standing when others stood. And she turned slightly too quickly, misjudged the edge of the low table, felt her hip catch it, and her balance go. He moved, fast, instinctive, completely involuntary in a way that everything else about him was not, his hand reaching toward her arm, already there, already close. He stopped, pulled back, one deliberate half-step, his hand returning to his side with the controlled precision of a man overriding something his body had decided without consulting him. The space between them held the shape of what hadn't happened. Mallory had steadied herself against the table edge. She was fine. She had been fine from about half a second in. But she stood there for a moment with her hand on the table and felt the ghost of a touch that hadn't landed and found, to her own private alarm, that it was more present than contact would have been. "I'm fine," she said. "I know," he said. His voice was completely level, his face was completely composed, and his hand, at his side, was closed in a loose fist that had not been there before. She picked up her bag. He walked her to the elevator. Not Min-jae, not Soo-yeon. Him. Down the length of the apartment, past the books and the paintings, and the wall of Seoul at night, to the elevator doors at the far end. He pressed the call button and they stood side by side for the 12 seconds it took to arrive, and neither of them filled it with words because the words would have been smaller than the silence. The doors opened. She stepped in, turned to face him. He was standing at the threshold with one hand resting on the doorframe, jacket still perfect, the city visible over his shoulder through the far window. He looked, for just this moment, in the specific light of the elevator and the late hour and everything that had passed through the last 3 hours, like a man who had been alone in something for a very long time and had not, until tonight, thought about what the alternative might feel like. "Don't go back to that restaurant," he said. "That's my job. Get a different one." She almost smiled. Almost. Held it back because she was not going to give him that tonight on top of everything else. The doors began to close. 2 seconds. She had 2 seconds. She had been turning the syllables over in her head for the last 20 minutes. The careful architecture of them, The way Nara had drilled her on honorifics 3 weeks ago over bibimbap and bad coffee, the specific register of formal but personal that sat in Korean like nowhere else in any language she had ever encountered. She breathed in. "감사합니다," she said. "Jiwon 씨." "Thank you." Jiwon. Not Mr. Kang. Not the formal distance of family name, his given name with the honorific suffix that sat right on the edge of familiar, respectful enough to be correct, personal enough to be daring. Her pronunciation was not perfect. Her tones were slightly wrong in the way they were always slightly wrong. But the meaning was unmistakable and the choice of register was completely deliberate, and she watched his face for the half second she had left before the doors finished closing. His expression did not change, but his hand on the door frame, the one resting there casually, the one that had been still the entire time, tightened. Just once. Just enough. The doors closed between them. Mallory rode down 32 floors alone and stared at the elevator ceiling and told herself very firmly that she was a grown adult woman who had just survived a genuinely dangerous evening, and that the only reasonable thing to feel right now was relief. She felt relief. She also felt something else sitting directly next to the relief that she was absolutely not going to examine tonight. The walk to the nearest subway took 11 minutes. She did them on autopilot, coat pulled closed, the city doing its late-night thing around her, the Han River visible between buildings in occasional silver flashes. She bought a can of citrus juice from a convenience store because she needed to do something ordinary with her hands and her body needed something, and she had forgotten to eat anything since 6 o'clock. She stood outside the convenience store and drank the juice and looked at the street and thought, I got in a car with a stranger. I sat in his apartment. I drank his tea and looked at his mother's painting and told him about my father and watched him almost touch me and didn't move away. She catalogued all of it like evidence. Then she got on the subway and went home. Her apartment was a 20-minute ride and a 5-minute walk from Hongdae Station, a small, clean, high-ceilinged place in Mapo-gu that she had spent 3 months making feel like hers. A bookshelf she'd built herself from market finds. Her father's record collection, 12 albums, the ones she couldn't leave behind, lined up on the windowsill. A hand-drawn map of Seoul on the wall with circles marking everywhere she had been and stars marking everywhere she still wanted to go. She dropped her bag at the door. She sat on the edge of her bed. She took out her phone. She opened the translation app. What Ji-won had said in Korean during the standoff, the thing he had said quietly, directly toward her, the thing he had not translated, she had been carrying it in her head since the moment he said it, each syllable filed with the same automatic precision she applied to everything. She typed them in now, slowly, phonetically, the way she would have heard them, checked each one, adjusted, hit translate. The screen loaded. She read it again, put the phone down on the bed beside her, picked it up. 가까이 있어. 내가 말할 때까지 움직이지 마. Stay close to me. Don't move until I say. Not to 민재, not to 수연. Said directly toward her, quietly, in the middle of a standoff with a dangerous man, in a language he had no reason to believe she could ever look up. He had said it to her like she already belonged somewhere he was responsible for keeping safe, before they knew each other's names, before she had told him a single thing about herself, before the painting, before the elevator, before any of it. She sat with that for a very long time. Outside, Seoul kept going. The Han River kept moving. October kept being cold and honest and indifferent the way October always was. Mallory Collins sat on the edge of her bed in her apartment in Mapo-gu, with her phone in her hands and the translation on her screen, and thought about a man with ink on his hands and his mother's painting on his wall who had told her in a language she didn't speak to stay close and not move. She was already certain that she was in a great deal of trouble. Not the Cheol-su kind. The other kind. the kind that crept up on you quietly, built from small things, an untranslated sentence, a hand that stopped itself, a name said like it had been kept somewhere careful. And by the time you recognized it for what it was, it had already made itself at home. She put her phone down, turned off the light, stared at the ceiling, did not sleep for a very long time. She told herself it was over. That was the first thing she did the next morning. Made that decision cleanly over coffee, standing at her kitchen window watching Mapogu wake up. Delivery trucks, a woman walking a small dog with a raincoat on. The Pojangmachar vendor 3 floors below, setting up his cart with the same methodical sequence he used every morning. Same order, same efficiency, the comfortable ritual of a man who had been doing the same thing in the same place for a very long time. Ordinary, continuous, hers. She had a life here. Students who mispronounced English with tremendous confidence and needed her. A routine that fit her like something broken in. A city she was still falling in love with, one neighborhood at a time. None of that had changed overnight. She was going to go to work. She was going to teach her Friday classes. She was going to stop at the market on the way home and buy vegetables and make the doenjang jjigae that Nara had been trying to teach her for 3 weeks, and she was going to eat it alone at her small table under the window, and that was going to be a good evening. She was not going to think about a penthouse in Hanam-dong. She was not going to reread a translation on her phone. She was absolutely not going to think about a hand on a door frame tightening once, just once, at the sound of his own name in her mouth. She got through the morning classes fine. She got through the afternoon classes fine. She was halfway through the last class of the day. A group of 12-year-olds practicing travel vocabulary with the commitment of people who planned to use it immediately, when her phone buzzed with a message from Nara. "Don't come in tonight. Call me when you finish." She stared at it. Then she messaged back, "I need to collect my check from Manager O. Direct deposit apparently means nothing to him. In and out, 20 minutes. Nara's response came in 4 seconds. "Mallory, please." She stared at that too. Then she finished her class, said goodbye to 12-year-olds who had collectively decided that their travel destination was Jeju Island and were very passionate about communicating this, and she went to Aria. It was 6 p.m. when she pushed through the staff entrance. The dinner shift was just beginning. The kitchen noise building, the front of house doing its pre-service choreography of candles and settings, and the particular focused energy of people preparing to perform hospitality for several hours. Manager O was, predictably, not at his desk. She found his assistant, collected her check, was in and out of the back office in 4 minutes. She was pulling her coat back on at the staff entrance, check in her bag, already thinking about the subway and the market and the doenjang jjigae, when something made her pause. She didn't know what it was. A frequency shift in the room, a change in pressure. The same instinct that had sent her walking toward table 7 20 hours ago. Animal, wordless, older than thought. She stepped into the doorway between the back of house and the restaurant floor, just to look, just for a second. He was at a corner table. Not Cheolsu. One of his men. She recognized him the way you recognize a face that your brain has filed under threat and refuses to release. Dark jacket, alone. A menu open in front of him that he was not reading. He was looking directly at her, not scanning the room, not checking his surroundings. Looking at her specifically, immediately. Like he had known exactly which door she would come through and had simply been waiting for her to appear in it. He held her gaze for a long moment with a small, composed smile that said everything it needed to say without a single word. "We know where you are. We know your face. We know how to find you. Tell him." She held his gaze for 3 full seconds. Did not look away. Did not move. She had learned a long time ago that flinching in front of people who wanted to see you flinch was the one gift you should never give them. Then she turned, walked back through the kitchen, found Nara at the pass. Kitchen exit, she said quietly. Nara didn't ask. She grabbed Mallory's bag from the hook, pressed it into her hands, and walked her personally to the back door with the brisk efficiency of someone who had been afraid this was coming since last night and had been mentally rehearsing for it. "Call me when you're home," Nara said. "I will." "Mallory." Nara grabbed her hand briefly. "Be careful, please. Whatever this is, just be careful." "I know," Mallory said. She pushed through the door into the service alley behind the restaurant. The alley was narrow and smelled of kitchen waste and cold air, and the distant charcoal smell of a restaurant 3 doors down, still setting up their outdoor grill. She turned toward the street, walking fast, coat not fully buttoned, mind already running. Move apartments, call the school, figure out what practical looks like when a crime syndicate has your home address. The restaurant door opened behind her. She turned fast, one hand already reaching for the pepper spray on her keychain. The one her mother had made her promise to carry before she left Atlanta, the one she had thought was probably unnecessary. It was not Cheol-Su's man. Kang Ji-won stood in the alley in a dark coat, alone. No Min-jae, no Soo-yeon, no flanking security or careful positioning or any of the infrastructure that had surrounded him every other time she had seen him. Just him. Hands in his coat pockets, breath visible in the October cold, looking at her with an expression that was as close to unguarded as she had yet seen on his face. She lowered her hand. They looked at each other in the narrow alley behind a Gangnam restaurant while the kitchen noise bled through the walls, and somewhere above them a window opened and released a brief warm cloud of garlic and sesame into the cold air. "You came back to the restaurant," he said. "I came for my check." "I told you not to come back. You're not my boss." Something moved in his eyes. Not irritation, the other thing. The thing that lived there and never quite made it further. "Are you all right?" he asked. The question was simple and direct and delivered with the specific quality of someone who actually needed to know the answer. Not performing concern, not managing a situation, actually asking. "I'm fine," she said. "He didn't approach me. He just sat there. Made sure I saw him." "I know. My people called me when he entered the building." She absorbed that. "You had someone watching the restaurant. I had someone watching the restaurant. Since last night." "Since last night?" She looked at him for a moment, filed it in the same place she had filed the restaurant staff being checked on, the tea she hadn't asked for, the I already have, the place that was getting crowded with evidence she wasn't ready to rule on yet. "Cheol-Su sent him to send me a message through you," Ji-won said. "He wants me to know that you're exposed, that he can reach you." "Can he?" "Not anymore." Flat. Final. The way he said things that were going to be true because he had decided they were going to be true. "What did you do?" "I had a conversation with Cheol-Su this afternoon." "What kind of conversation?" "The kind," he said, "that doesn't need to be repeated." She held his gaze. "I don't want anyone hurt because of me." "I said that last night and I meant it." "I know you did." "Did anyone get hurt?" "No," he said. "It was a conversation. Words. An understanding reached." She searched his face. He let her search it. Didn't look away, didn't close off, just stood there in the alley cold and let her look at him for as long as she needed. She believed him. That probably said something about her that she would need to examine later. "Come on," he said. "I'll walk you to the subway." "You don't need to." "I know I don't need to." She looked at him. He looked at her. October Seoul breathed cold air around them. She started walking. He fell into step beside her without ceremony, without making it a thing, like two people walking together was the most ordinary outcome of this very extraordinary evening. They came out of the alley onto the main street, and Seoul absorbed them immediately. The movement and noise and light of it, the city going about its business completely unbothered by the fact that a waitress and a crime lord were walking down a Gangnam pavement at 6:15 on a Friday evening like it was nothing. My students asked me today, Mallory said, to describe an adventurous experience, in English, as a demonstration. What did you say? I told them about the time I got lost in Baek.Just for 3 hours because I refused to admit the map app was right and I was wrong. Was that adventurous? It was the most adventurous thing I had done in Seoul up until approximately 8:47 last night, yes. He made a sound. Low, brief, almost nothing. Almost nothing was a lot from him, and she was already learning to hear it. They walked half a block in silence. The street opened up ahead of them. The wide Gangnam Boulevard, with its moving lights and its late evening foot traffic, the subway entrance visible at the corner, the city doing what it always did, which was keep going. She stopped at the corner, turned to face him. I have a life here, she said, clearly, directly. The same voice she had used last night, the one that didn't shake. A job I care about, students I care about. A routine I built from nothing, and I am proud of it. I am not giving any of it up. I know. And I am not an asset. I am not a pawn. I am not something that gets moved around a board without being consulted. I know that too. And whatever last night was, I need you to understand that I make my own choices. About everything. Including this. He looked at her for a long moment. The streetlight caught the ink on his hands where they had come out of his pockets. The city moved around them, indifferent and electric. I know what you are, he said quietly. Not I know what you can do. Not I know what you're worth. I know what you are. Like he had spent last night after she left, working out the answer to a question he hadn't known he was asking. Like the painting and the translation app and the elevator and all of it had added up to something he could now name even if she couldn't yet. The streetlight caught his face and for once, for one unguarded, undefended, completely unintentional moment, she saw all of it. The man underneath the architecture, the one who kept his mother's painting at sitting height so he could see it from a chair, the one who checked on restaurant staff nobody asked him to check on. The one whose hand had closed in a fist at his side because he had stopped it from reaching out. She breathed out slowly. This is, she said, genuinely the strangest thing that has ever happened to me. And Kang Ji-won, who had not smiled properly in longer than he could honestly remember, who had not had a reason to, who had been careful and controlled and armored for so many years that the armor had started to feel like skin, smiled. Not the almost. Not the thing that lived in his eyes and never arrived. The real one. Small and brief and completely unguarded. There and gone in the space of 2 seconds. Like a light in a window seen from a moving car. Noted, he said. And they walked. Later, much later, after the subway and the market and the doenjang jjigae that turned out better than expected, after she had called Nara and said, I'm fine, I promise, go to sleep. After she had stood at her window and looked at the piece of Seoul she could see from it, Mallory thought about the word noted, the way he said it, like he had received something and was keeping it. Like the strangest thing that has ever happened to me and noted were the beginning of a language that only had 2 speakers. She looked at her father's records on the windowsill, at the map on the wall with its circles and its stars, at the city outside doing what it did, loud and lit and endlessly, generously alive. She thought about a man who was not a bad man. She thought about a man who was not a safe one. She thought about Min-jae's voice in a rear-view mirror telling her to understand the difference. She thought, I am beginning to think the difference might be everything. Seoul in October. The Han River somewhere in the dark, moving the way it had always moved, patient and indifferent and older than all of them. And Mallory Collins, who had come here for space, for newness, for the freedom of being unknown, stood at her window in Mapogu and understood, with the quiet certainty of someone who had been reading rooms her whole life, that she had just walked into the most interesting one she had ever found. She wasn't leaving. Not yet. Maybe not for a long time. And that, right there, is where we leave them. Mallory Collins, Kang Ji-won. A Gangnam restaurant, a penthouse in Hanam-dong, a translation on a phone screen at midnight, and a smile that lasted 2 seconds and meant everything. If this story got you, and I think it did, hit that like button right now. Seriously, it takes 1 second and it helps more than you know. Subscribe if you haven't, because there is so much more where this came from, and you do not want to miss what comes next. Drop a comment and tell me. What was the moment that got you? Was it the whisper, the painting, the hand on the doorframe, or was it that smile at the end that finally arrived? I read every single one. Seoul is waiting. So are they. See you in the next one.